Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here. It is time for Momentum Monday evening, 8 p.m. This 8 p.m. Central Time. And this is a series where every week I just come and join and spend some time with you. And we choose one idea, one thought, one trend, one tip, one technique. And in 15 minutes ish, I try to give you some idea that will help you or inspire you to continue to build momentum for interrupting race based hatred and violence. Just in case this is your first time being exposed to momentum or to me, Tracy Brown, this is part of the What is Mine to Do Facebook group where we ask ourselves the question, what is mine to do to interrupt or end race based hatred or violence? So we specifically focus on the impact of race, racism, and race relations on our individual activities. There are lots of ways that I am and many members of the group are involved in collective responses that are involved in community work and protesting and all of that. But for the What Is Mine to Do group, we focus on how do we show up in our individual interactions with the people we meet or come into contact with wherever we go, work, church, school, the grocery store, family gatherings. How can we as individuals actually show up in a way that interrupts the patterns that allow racism and the negative aspects of that to continue and to expand? And as you know, and I know, there is more work than any of us can do, but we still have to do our little part when we have the opportunity. So today, I'm going to focus on this idea of offering a different perspective. Now, I'll be honest, it came up as an idea because there are three things. One, someone was talking to me about responding to something that was going on in a group that they are part of, and in the process of talking about it, they said, well, now that I've taken a day and I've really thought about it, I'm not sure I'm actually going to say anything at all. I mean, in the moment, but I knew I needed to calm down, and now maybe I don't need to say anything. And of course, it's no, you do still need to say something. You get to choose how you frame it, you get to choose what you say about it, but it's great that you didn't just react in the moment, and you must still say something. And so we often talk about speak up, show up, but I'm thinking about it different. Like, you still have to share your perspective, because in that case, they knew their perspective was very different than a number of the people who were in the group. Number two reason is because last week I was in a conversation with someone who had participated in the Breaking the Silence challenge, Break the Silence challenge that I did a few years ago. And we were talking about, it might be time to bring that back. And they suggested to me that I do the 5 day or 6 day Breaking the Silence challenge, because there's so much going on and people aren't always clear when they should speak. And then the third reason, this idea of offering a different perspective, came up just recently, like in the last week, is because I was in a different conversation with someone who was actually asking me to coach them about what to say. And where we ended was, it's not that you have to be right and they have to be wrong, but you are both entitled to your own perspectives. And if you don't express your perspective, then it is almost like saying the other person's perspective is stronger, is better, is right, is the one that holds the most weight, etc., etc. And that pretty much denies that your perspective means anything. So those are the reasons why today we're talking about offering a different perspective. And it's not always easy because most of us have been raised and trained to be combative in when we have a difference versus just, hey, I have a different perspective. I'm not telling you yours is good or bad or wrong or right. I'm just expressing my perspective. And guess what? You don't have to agree with me, but I'm going to share my perspective. And that takes a lot of that tension away that makes many of us uncomfortable if we think we're getting ready to get into a battle or it has to be a debate. And that debate implies that one of us will win the debate and the other will lose the debate. And in reality, we could dialogue about it. Sorry, phone live. Uh, we could actually have a dialogue about our different perspectives without it being an argument, without it being a win lose. So having set that up, what I'm thinking about is, okay, now that I took 8 minutes to do that, how am I going to give you some examples in 8 minutes or less? So, because I do want to give you examples and not just say you should offer a different perspective. And I'm giving you the reasons why. You need to be prepared and you need to be willing and you need to be courageous enough to offer a different perspective. So, yes, adding a perspective can be food for thought to think about it a different way. And you will be interrupting the flow. So, let me give you some examples that come to mind. One of the ones that I really like is I will ask people, let's say someone just told a joke and it really was inappropriate and race based. Like they were making the joke based on a stereotype or a negative connotation. And so one that I've used a lot is, wait, huh? Have you considered that some of us may have neighbors or may have a child or a family member or others we really care about in that group you just joked about? Like, did you think about that? Like, have you considered that? And often it's because people right tell jokes to folks they think, well, you're just like me, or you think like I do. And so, I've used this in a race related way, race and ethnicity related way, when I've had people who, made jokes about people who speak Spanish, or I've been in groups where people, especially depending on what's going on politically, will make what they think is a joke or a funny comment about people who are of Arab descent or people who are Muslims or, LGBTQ, of course, but around race and ethnicity, I hear it because they think no one in the group is a member of that group. And so the group they're joking about or making fun of. And it's like I'm really quick to say, wow, I'm surprised you would, say that. Did you consider that, I might have a neighbor I really love that I've lived next to for 10 years who fits in that group. Or my cousin is married to someone who is in that group. So, and so in that sense, I'll be saying, so I really don't find it funny, but bigger than that, have you considered that, anybody in this room might be in that situation? Another example that you can use that will help you actually go into this conversation um, is I have heard myself say, what I'm about to say, well, it may not apply to everyone here, but what I've learned about people in that category. And then I'll use an example. that defies whatever the negative connotation or stereotype is. And I'll acknowledge up front, everybody in the group may not have had this experience or may not think this way, but I've learned this. Another example that you can use is because sometimes when you are doing this, people then respond to you and they, they go into debate or attack mode and they're like, well, no, just listen. You're not hearing what I'm saying because you're not agreeing with them. A lot of times my way of offering a different perspective is just to simply say, well, I don't agree with that, and stop. Oh, I don't agree with that. Or if they're telling a joke, wow, yeah, I don't find that funny. Or uh, can you explain what the joke is? Because I missed it. But like, 5 or 6 words and stop and put it back on them to explain. But a lot of times, if I just say, oh, yeah, well, I don't agree with that because they've made some statement, they'll say, they'll either try to tell me again or they're like, well, you're not hearing me. So then my answer often, or my response often is, oh no, I hear you. I just don't agree with you. Or, oh, I hear you, or I understand exactly what you're saying, but I have a different perspective. So I'm basically saying that you are able to think what you think, and you can say it, and you need to know everybody in the room doesn't agree with what you're saying. So, what examples can you think of? If an example comes to mind for you where you've been able to interrupt the conversation and just add your own perspective, feel free to put it in the chat or put it in the comments. And I'll give you 1 or 2 more, and then we'll be at time for tonight. So, I was in a conversation over the weekend with someone, and we were talking about privilege and what it really means, and in a completely different context, and it wasn't race related. But we had the opportunity to talk about what is privilege as a sociology and psychology term. And I thought, yeah, that's a good example too, because I could easily say, if I were trying to give a different perspective, I could easily say, oh, yeah, I used to think privilege was about all the things I worked really hard for, too, and I earned that privilege. And that is one use of the word. But then I did my research and learned the way it's being used here with white privilege. It's about the unearned benefits. It's about the things that people take for granted that happen so automatically they think that's normal, but it's not the way it happens for everybody else. So I can do a little bit of education without again saying, you don't know what you're talking about. You're stupid. That's wrong. I can just say, hey, I used to think that too, but then I learned this information. And as a result of that, I think differently now. And again, that stops short of saying, so you need to change your mind. All I'm doing is adding a perspective. And you would be so surprised at how effective this can be. Because we've been trained to think that we must be combative, we must argue, we must fight, and we must win. But I'm here to tell you or remind you that it's the little wins of adding information, education, of equipping people with a different way to think about it that actually begin to add up to bigger wins than we ever could imagine. 15 minutes is up. My name is Tracy Brown. This is this week's episode of Momentum. I want to invite you to join me over at the What Is Mine to Do public Facebook group, where we ask ourselves the question every day: what is mine to do to interrupt or end race-based hatred and violence? See you again next week. 8 p.m., Monday night, Central Time, for Momentum.